Hello and welcome back to my channel where we make life happen for us instead of to us, and I talk about how we can do that. And today I want to talk about why and how we can use our imaginations to reach our goals or help us make life happen for us. And I'm not trying to be like woo-woo or mystical when I talk about this. I mean literally, like scientifically and practically, we can actually use our imaginations to help us get what we want, and we can take advantage of it in that way. And I know I've kind of talked about this before, but I kind of really want to do a deep dive into us understanding this so that we kind of know better how to use it. Anyway, the short of this is our imaginations can help us get what we want because our minds and bodies can't really tell the difference between reality and imagination, and we can use that to our advantage. So the way this video will be outlined is that I'm first going to make some statements like the one I just made and talk about why and how those statements are true, because we need to understand why these things are true to understand why it's important for us to use our imagination so that we can take advantage of it. Then I'm going to talk about the how. So how we take advantage of our imagination to reach our goals or get what we want or make life happen for us. So the thing is, our minds will, either consciously or unconsciously, bring about whatever we constantly tell it or show it or whatever we're convinced of. And whatever we experience in our minds is real to us. And we know that this is true because we will feel that proof in our bodies, right? If we imagine something, our bodies will experience our imaginations as though it's literally happening because it can't tell the difference between imagination and reality. So to address the first thing about our minds bringing things about, I've talked about this previously in my videos, but if we're constantly thinking something or our brain is constantly told something either by us or other people, we're going to believe it, right? Our brains like patterns. And if we notice a pattern, we latch on. And this includes repetition, right? Repetition is a pattern. So our brains are going to notice that pattern. It's going to notice the repetition, notice that pattern, and it's going to latch onto it and start to believe it as true. But in any case, if we're constantly telling ourselves something or we're convinced of something, right, our brain is going to work to prove that whatever we are telling it or whatever we are convinced of is true. Our brain will either, it'll do things like it'll either highlight certain instances to prove that what we believe or what we're constantly telling ourselves is true, or it'll disregard instances that go against what we believe as true so that we can keep in our mind that what we're believing is true. And sometimes we will even manufacture situations that will prove our brains right. So in psychology, this phenomenon that I'm talking about is better known as the self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'll share a story that I have shared before. But when I was in university and taking psychology, my professor shared her experience with this. So she was doing a study where she had to give participants something to drink. One group had juice, or like they had a liquid that didn't do anything, and another group had a liquid that did something, right? And I guess they were trying to see if there were actually any effects. So while doing the study, one of the participants from the juice group went up to her and said something like, "Wow, this is a lot to drink." And she affirmed and just said, "Yeah." And that was it, right? Okay, so at the end of the study, that same person was acting as though they were drunk. And she was very confused. And, she went up to them and she asked them, like, what's happened? What's going on? Why are they acting like this? And then they told her, remember, like, I had a lot to drink. I was drinking a lot. And what they meant was alcohol. They thought they were drinking a lot of alcohol. To which she then told them, no, like, I didn't give you anything. But at that point, it didn't matter, right? Because they were convinced, very convinced that they were drinking alcohol. And so their body responded as though they were drinking alcohol, and they had, the flush face, everything, stumbling over their words, as though they drank alcohol and got drunk. So this is what I mean by like our brains will bring about whatever it is we're focused on or constantly telling ourselves or that we're convinced of. Now, to address the other thing I said about like our minds and bodies not knowing the difference between imagination and reality because it experiences them as the same thing. So I think we've all experienced this. Like if you have ever, if you were ever about to do something that was going to make you really nervous, like let's say you were going to do public speaking or, you know, go up on some heights or something and you don't like heights, like the thing didn't happen, but your body is experiencing the thing as though it's happening right now, right? Because you are imagining what it's like to do the thing. And so your body is reacting as though you are actually doing the thing. So then you start to feel nerves, your palms are sweaty, and you know, your heart beats racing. So this is what I mean by like our minds and bodies don't know the difference between imagination and reality because it experiences them as the same thing. But we can actually use this to our advantage to help us get the lives that we want. Now I want to talk about the fun part, which is the how we take advantage of our imagination to get the thing that we want or make life happen for us. So I'm going to be sharing the how from the way Neville Goddard talks about it. Neville Goddard is someone who has successfully used his imagination to get a bunch of things he wants and or wanted, and then other people have used his methods and have also found success as well, or like the spin-offs of his methods. So I want to kind of talk about the steps that he talks about. So in his book, The 5 Lessons, he mentions, as I mentioned, steps of exactly how we can use our imaginations to get what we want. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about why I think these steps work. So the book says, when you know exactly what you want, construct in your mind's eye a single, simple event which implies fulfillment of your desire. Instead of sitting back and looking at yourself as though you were on the screen, you be the actor in the drama. Restrict the event to one single action. If you are going to shake a hand because that implies fulfillment of your desire, then do that and that only. Do not shake hands and then wander off in your imagination to a dinner party or to some other place. Restrict your action to simply shaking hands and do it over and over again until that handshake takes on the solidity and the distinctness of reality. If you feel you cannot remain faithful to an action, I want you to now define your objective and then condense the idea, which is your desire, into a single phrase, a phrase which implies fulfillment of your desire. Some phrase such as, isn't it wonderful? Or if I felt thankful because I thought someone was instrumental in bringing my desire to pass, I could say thank you and repeat it with feeling over and over again like a lullaby until my mind was dominated by the single sensation of thankfulness. If you imagine yourself shaking another person's hand, do not use your physical hand. Let it remain immobilized. But imagine that housed within your hand is a more subtle, more real hand, which can be extracted in your imagination. Put your imaginary hand into the imaginary hand of your friend who stands before you and feel the handshake. So in short, Neville is saying that we need to do 5 things. Number 1, know exactly what we want. So we need to know the goal we want to achieve or know what we want to happen for us. Number 2, use our imagination in first-person view. Number 3, imagine one simple event that would indicate that we got what we wanted. Number 4, imagine that event with feeling or with our senses. And number 5, if we can't imagine the event, say something that we would say after we got what we wanted and say it until it feels real. So I'd like to briefly talk about each of these things, about why I think he says to do them and why they'll be effective in helping us use our imagination to get what we want. So the first one, knowing exactly what we want. Okay, so we can't imagine or envision what we want without knowing what we want, right? And I've talked about this before, about knowing what we want. I'm going to link a video in the description. And that's where I talk about like how we figure that out, because I know that sometimes it's not always easy. Like we may have too many options, or we may just not know at all what we want or should want. So I'm going to link that video in the description. The second thing he mentions is using our imagination in first person view. So I don't know about you, but I know that when I'm, usually when I'm daydreaming, I'm seeing myself in third person, right? Like I'm here and it's like I'm watching myself like a movie. And I think probably a lot of people do that. But I think the reason that Neville says to use your imagination in first person view is because it helps you engross yourself more in what you're imagining and helps it feel more real to you. Because as we discussed, the more something is real to you, the more you're convinced of something, is the more your brain will work to bring it about. So it's like the placebo effect, right? Let's say you go to the doctor and you're not feeling well. You go to the doctor doesn't know what's wrong with you, so they give you a pill. You go home, you take the pill, you feel better, right? But then later on, you go back to the doctor for something and ask about it, and the doctor lets you know that they gave you a sugar pill. But the thing is, the pill actually worked. Well, not the pill worked. You thought the pill worked, right? Like you were so convinced that you were taking a pill that was doing something for you that you ended up getting healed anyway, right? Like you were so engrossed in that, so convinced of that your body literally responded as though you took a pill that did something for you, right? So it's the same with your mind. That's why I think that Neville says to envision in first person, because it really helps to convince your brain that the thing is actually happening or has already happened. So number 3, imagine one simple event that would indicate that we got what we wanted. So I think that Neville is saying to envision one thing because envisioning a single action makes it much easier for us to focus on, right? Now, he does mention here that the action that we should imagine should be the thing that happens after we get the thing that we want. And I think he just says that because it makes it easier for the thing we want to feel real to us. And also because since it already happened, our brain isn't going to argue with us that it isn't real, right? Like sometimes for me, when I think things, especially positive, like it's like my brain will argue back with me. Like if I'm trying to think about a situation and think positive of it, my brain's going to argue back and be like, no, that's not true. You can't think like that. You're only going to disappoint yourself if you think so positively. You're going to disappoint yourself and hurt yourself. And what is it? And it's not realistic. My brain loves to say that, right? But if I am envisioning what it's like after I get the thing I want, then my brain kind of shuts up, right? Because this is after the fact. So at that point, it's just kind of experiencing what it's like. And it's kind of like, okay, like, so this is what it would be like after you get the thing that you want. Okay, like this is okay. This is nice. This feels safe, and it normalizes to my brain that the thing that I want, like it's okay for it to happen. Okay, so number 4, imagine that single event with feeling or with our senses. And again, I think this is just to help engross ourselves more in our imagination. Like I think Neville mentions this because it's going to help us engross ourselves more in our imagination so that it feels real to us, right? When something happens to us where our emotions are involved, like our emotions are invoked, our brain's going to pay more attention to it because clearly if it's something that's invoking an emotion, our brain's going to be like, hey, that's important. I need to pay attention to that, right? I want to either avoid that thing from happening again because I experienced a negative emotion, or I want to ensure, like I want to try and replicate that thing again because I'm feeling a positive emotion, right? So when we are, using our emotions and our senses, like, and putting those together in the imagination, it's kind of a double whammy for our brain, and for what and it helps what we're imagining to feel really real to us, like it's actually happening or like it actually happened. And number 5, if we can't imagine or consistently imagine an event, say something that we would say after we got what we wanted and say it until it feels real. And I think this is kind of like the previous steps, but in a slightly different way. So to me, this step is still all about having that event feel real to us and normalize to us, and gets our brains to like shut up and stop fighting us, because we're still going to be, he does say to say it until it feels real. So we're still going to be invoking an emotion there, right? It's all about getting it to feel real. Okay, so I actually have a few more steps that I wanted to add that I think are really helpful, that I either got from Neville or elsewhere. And I think these are really important to mention here to get us very engrossed in our imagination. Okay, so the sixth step that I'm going to mention here, it wasn't in the passage that I just shared, but Neville does talk about it. And it's imagining what we want while we're sleepy or in a sleepy state. So I talked about this in a previous video, but when we are in a sleepy state, it's like our defenses are down in our brain, right? So because our defenses are down, our brains will be more susceptible or be more likely to take in the things that we want to impress into it, right? And it's going to be a lot less likely to argue with us. Now, I will say that like we don't have to imagine these like actions or events right before we go to sleep. We can, right? Because it's a sleepy state. But I think what Neville is really talking about here is like a state that is when our minds are calm. So this can be when we're going to sleep. This can be when we're just waking up. This can be when we're meditating. This can even be when we're in the shower, right? Sometimes for me, when I'm in the shower, my brain is much calmer. And maybe it's meditative. Maybe that's why I take such long showers. I don't know. But for me, in the shower helps. I do also want to mention, like right when we wake up, like why that's a good time. I came across a study sometime in the past. It mentioned something about our brain waves and like how our brain waves are right when we wake up. It's kind of, I think, similar to that sleepy state. In fact, I think it might be more impactful than the sleepy state in terms of taking in information. But like, it's not just like, there are studies about this and you can look at them. So that's why I'm mentioning right when you wake up, that could be a good time for you to imagine the event or the action, right? So in short, it's helpful to use our imaginations, like in this calm state right before we go to bed or right when we wake up or just whenever our minds are calm. Okay, so the next step, the seventh step I'm going to mention is to repeat the imagination, which Neville actually mentioned in this passage. I should have put it in the previous steps, but whatever. In a past recent video, I think 2 videos ago, I talked about why repetition is so important to us reaching our goals. But part of what our brains bring about for us is what we're constantly thinking about, what we're constantly telling ourselves, and what we're constantly focused on, right? So repetition is part of that. Repetition helps with that focus and with getting things in our brains. So we want to be repeating these imaginations or scenes in our heads to solidify it in our brains, right? That's even one of the reasons why when we are studying, we look over information over and over. The repetition helps get it in our brains. So the same way, we want to use repetition to help those scenes, those actions, those imaginations solidify in our brains, which will help it feel real to us. Okay, now my last tip here is just to have fun with this. So when I talk about imagining these scenes, like I don't think it needs to be the same scene over and over. Like I think that'll get really boring. So like we can think about different scenes that might happen and imagine those things. Like we're still going to think about imagine scenes of what happens after we get the thing that we want, but we can imagine like different scenes of what might happen after we get the thing that we want. So let's say that what I want is to get a promotion. Let's say I'm working a job and I want to get a promotion, right? Like, yeah, I might initially think about like shaking someone's hand for them, in them congratulating me, or I might imagine myself I might say thank you, like what Neville mentioned, and feel as though I'm actually thanking the person who promoted me. But I might also do things like imagining my husband or another family member telling me like, oh, you got promoted. That is so awesome. That is so great. I'm so proud of you, right? Or I might imagine the money in my account going, like what the money would look like in my account after getting promoted, right? Or I might imagine updating my LinkedIn title from like support to manager or something like that, right? So that's what I mean by like we can have fun with it. It doesn't have to be the same exact scene over and over that we're imagining. Okay, so to recap, our minds can't tell the difference between imagination and reality and will bring about whatever it is that we are convinced of or consistently showing it or telling it. And because of that, we can use our imagination to our advantage to help us get what we want. And we can specifically do this, use our imagination to our advantage by knowing what we want and then imagining in first person view and with feeling and with our senses one simple thing that would happen after we get what we want. Or we can say or repeat something to ourselves that we might say after we get the thing that we want. And again, it's best to repeat the scene or phrase. It doesn't have to be the exact one, but the repetition part is important. And again, it's also great to do this when we are in a sleepy state or like a state where our minds are calm, right? So these are the steps that I've accumulated from like some of the best practices that I've seen either from Neville or from other people. So that is it. I hope this video gave you some helpful, actionable information about how exactly you can use your imagination to help you make life happen for you and how you can use your imagination to your advantage. And I decided to create this video because like I will see pieces of this here and there, like people will talk about one step or the other step, or they might read a passage from Neville, but they're never really talking about why you should do those steps, or like why Neville says, oh, do this step. Like they're not really talking about that and like the practical aspects. So that's why I wanted to create this video for you. So I hope you found it helpful. Let me know if you did in the comments. And if you do like seeing things like this, or you would like a push to help you get life happening for you, I'm going to invite you to join my newsletter, which will be linked in the description, because I'm going to be sending messages related to that. The newsletter is free, so you can just like join it. And I'm going to be sending information like this. I've also created a journal. I did mention that I would, but I've also created a journal now, a focused journal. It's on Notion for now. So you're going to need like a free Notion account in order to like download it into your instance of Notion. But that's the journal that I'm using right now. The structure of that journal is the one that I'm using right now. And I feel like it has really helped me to get to my goals and make life happen for me. And it's still doing that. So if that's something you're interested in, it's cheap, it's like $5. Just like reach out to me and let me know that you're interested and I will send that to you. Or you can look on my website. Probably by the time you see this, it'll be on my site. So that is it. I wish you wealth, health, and happiness. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.